All right, so in this video, I'm gonna show you how to structure your workouts and how to train for boxing. All right, one common question that I've been getting for years is, how do I train for boxing? How do I set up my routine with all the things that I can do? Skip rope, bag work, partner drill, sparring. How do I set it all up? The first thing, as you know, is it's not an easy answer because you got boxers who are starting out, beginners. You got somebody who's going for the first fight. You got somebody who may be novice, going for a novice tournament, 5 to 10 fights. You got open class, elite fighters, pro fighters. So it's gonna be different at each stage. In this video, I'm gonna give you sort of a structure for beginners and give you some insights for more advanced and how you can adjust those variables based on your current level of experience and fitness. Now, this video is also to introduce my new boxing workout training plans, which I finally finished after months and months of doing it just the way I wanted to do it, setting it up just the way I wanted to set it up. Every time I got close to the finish, I always thought, there's more that I can put in. There's more that I can add to this. In these training plans, basically I've structured it so that there are 4 levels. Within the 4 levels, I have 4 different types of workouts. So workouts that emphasize different aspects of your boxing. Some workouts focus on mobility and footwork. So being able to move around more, being more agile, working on your footwork. Some workouts focus more on speed and power, making sure you have the hand speed, making sure you have juice in your shots, making sure that you're doing the drills for that. Other workouts are focused on pure endurance. That's gonna develop technical efficiency. That's gonna develop your mental stamina and your physical stamina to not only see yourself through the fight, but see yourself through the training that develops you. And the last section is focused on freestyle, which is developing your style, working on tactics, putting it all together so that it suits your mentality, your body type, and your style. And as well, on another note, don't forget, New York City, April 1st at Complete Body. That's my seminar. If you can't make it out to the seminar, then you can always access the video. I'm gonna be selling the video after. So if you're around the world and you wanna check out the seminar, that's gonna be available a couple weeks after the seminar as a video. Here's my best advice and insight in how to structure your workouts with you going on your own. Now, some of you, if you're in a solid gym, you're already doing this. You're probably already training in this way. So there'll be some other factors that I'm gonna introduce that you might not have thought about. It's gonna help you structure your training over the months and potentially over the years. Okay, so let's talk about training from a general perspective. When you're looking at your boxing training, you're looking at 3 variables that you want to build up. One is intensity, one is frequency, and the other one is volume. Now, frequency and volume are somewhat related because if you train more often, you're gonna be training more on the techniques. But generally it goes like this. Intensity, how hard and fast you go. You could almost, that's called work rate. You could almost say that's punch output, but it's not just punch output, it's also how much footwork you're doing, how much head movement you're doing. So if you have a combo like 1, 2, 3, or you have a combo like 1, 2 slip, in a way your work rate is about the same. Or let's say you have a combo 1, 2 pop back 2, then you're sort of looking at a high work rate or around a similar work rate. So it's almost like movements per minute or movements per round would be your intensity. One excellent way to assess your intensity that is fairly cost effective is to wear a heart rate monitor. And it can be a bit of a hassle getting that heart rate monitor watch under the glove, and they can be expensive, around $100, so it's not really cheap, but this way you can check your heart rate and see how you're working and what you're working at. And you can start to see where you fall off. For example, let's say you're training in a round with intensity and your heart rate gets up to 170 beats per minute. And then when you're resting in between your rounds, you're able to drop it down to like 120 beats per minute. And then as you go back into your second round or third round, it goes back up to 170, back down to 120. All of a sudden you get to round 5 or 6 in your training, you're up to 175, maybe high 180s, because your body's getting fatigued, it's not recovering, and then you can't drop down to that 120. Suddenly you're dropping down to 150, 140. You're not able to recover. This is how you can use a heart rate monitor to see where your sticking points are. You can almost kind of see what round you're gonna fatigue in based on the intensity that you're outputting. So if you can control, to a certain extent, you can control the variables of heart rate, you can start to see which round you're stuck in, and then you can start to work through there and push through there with a number of things that we'll talk about in this video. So intensity is work rate, but heart rate is also another way to check it. Next one is frequency. How many days per week do you train? If you're looking at beginners, you're looking at often 3 to 4 days a week. When you're looking at more advanced, it's going from the 4 to potentially 6 days a week. Next thing that you want to adjust for, you want to keep in mind, is volume. Volume, what I've seen in my experience, beginners, you're looking at about 40 to 60 rounds a week. So let's say we take in all your rounds. You got shadow boxing, heavy bag, you got Padwork, you got double M bag, you got speed bag, you got partner drills, and you got other freestyle and open drills. Let's say like working the slip bag or working on punch out drills. A beginner, let's say 3 days a week, 4 days a week is gonna be putting in about 40 to 60 rounds. Then you get somebody who is maybe a novice, had a first fight or in their first 5 fights, then you're looking at closer to 60 to 80 rounds per week. Then you're looking at elite amateurs or amateurs, then you're looking at around 80 to 100 rounds per week. Of course, intensity matters. If you're going full blitz all out at 60 rounds, that might be equivalent to somebody else's 100 rounds. But in general, this is what I tend to see, and this is sort of the levels that I was training at. Then you're looking at pro or Olympic level, elite amateur, then you're working more towards the 100 plus rounds range. So as you build up your training, you want to factor in intensity, as we talked about, frequency, how many days per week you're training, but volume is going to be, let's say on a weekly basis, you're looking at anywhere between 40 to 100 rounds, depending on what your level is. So you're going to adjust for that as you go. Okay, so before we get into the specifics of the actual training, what you're going to do in each area, let's talk about how to plan your overall training. And anyone who doesn't know about this should look up macro cycles, micro cycles in training, and how to build up and develop your training as you go. Anybody out there knows who's going hard in the boxing game knows you can't go all out 100% every day. You're going to fatigue, you're going to zap yourself out. So you have to prepare for that in advance so that you're slowly building yourself up. One thing I experienced myself personally is once I go more than 2 hard days in a row, the third day, no matter how hard I try to make that 100% day, I just don't have the juice. So you're gonna find that within a week of training, let's say you're gonna put in 5 days during that week, you're not gonna be able to train at the same intensity throughout that week. So you're gonna have different focus during that week. Easiest way to look at it is 1 day hard, 1 day a little bit lighter. 1 day hard, 1 day a little bit lighter. That's one way you can go. Another way that I like to personally go is 2 days hard, 1 day light, 2 days hard, 1 day light, or 1 day off. And that's sort of how I used to like to work it. I would like to go 2 days hard and push it in a row. If you are sparring, you don't want the workout the day before to be your blitz all-out workout. But after your sparring is when you got to push yourself. It's all too common, and I made this mistake in the beginning, is that you go in, you warm up, you do your shadow boxing, you do your sparring, and then after that, you take off your wraps, you do a light skip and a stretch, and you go home. And I did that in the beginning. That's one of my mistakes. That was a little bit of the culture of my gym at the time, is that after sparring, you've done your work, so now just chill. Really, those training rounds after the sparring are the championship rounds of your training. Once you put in the sparring, everything is gravy on top, so take advantage of that to work, to put in those rounds. When you're done your sparring, one of my quotas that I used to work for is I'm gonna do 10 rounds heavy bag sparring combo. So if I did 6 rounds of sparring, I got 4 more I've got to do on the heavy bag. If I did 4 rounds sparring, I got 6 to go on the heavy bag. And once you put in those rounds of sparring, that's when your mind is fresh. You go right to the bag and you start to think and work through some of the things that you just faced, so it's fresh in your mind. Shadow boxing, conditioning, make sure that on a sparring day, you give it everything you've got after sparring. All right, so within the month, one thing that you can do is make sure as you're building up your weekly cycles, give yourself 1 week of the month where you go a little bit lighter. And that's gonna be really hard to do. You're gonna feel guilty about it. If you've been training 5 days a week, a couple days, 3 or 4 of those days hard, and then you have a week where you're gonna go and maybe just train for 3 days or 4 days and they're kind of light, you're gonna feel guilty about that. But you have to learn to build up that energy and save yourself, let yourself recover so that in the next monthly cycle, you're gonna go hard again. Remember, like, even though you're feeling guilty, you're not putting in that same effort, you're building up steam for that next month and you're gonna go even harder. Week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. Week 1, you're gonna do your cycle like we talked about. Week 2 is gonna be the same thing, but you're gonna try to get more out of yourself. You're gonna try to get more volume. You're gonna try to get more intensity. You're gonna try to get a little bit more, 10% more than what you did the week before. Week 3, you're gonna try to get more again. More out of week 3 than you did out of week 2. And then in week 4, you're gonna go light. You're gonna scale it back. Week 4 is gonna be easier than week 1. So you're basically gonna go 3 steps up, and then you're gonna come back down below the first step. In the next cycle, cycle 2, in the next month, week 1 should look something like week 2. And this is how you're gonna stagger up and come down and stagger up and come down. And again, we're measuring those variables: frequency, intensity, volume. So try to keep track of your training so that you know, okay, I'm in my 3rd month now of training, and this is what I was doing in month 1, so I know I should be doing more in month 3. I'm in week 3 of month 3. I should be putting in something a little bit extra. So this is basically how you're gonna build it up over the weeks and over the months. Now, there's gonna come a point with competitions, on season, off season. In the off season, you have to establish a baseline for yourself. It doesn't have to go up and cycle all like this. You can focus on other things. You can focus on conditioning, you can focus on strength, but your skill has to have a baseline. So you might set yourself at, let's say, 60 to 70. If you're used to maybe training 80 to 100 rounds a week, then maybe you set yourself a baseline, like 60 to 70 rounds a week, for those few months in the off season where you don't have any fights coming up, maintain your skill. Then it's a similar thing. If you're gonna have a fight coming up and you get into camp, that would be sort of a difference. So let's say you got a tournament coming up in 8 weeks, then you're really gonna have to work on working those cycles. And it's gonna adjust a little bit different because you won't necessarily, and this is where the specifics of a detailed training plan come in, and I can't give you these specifics right here because I don't know your situation, but you will look at building up for 1 month, scaling back a little bit to have a little bit of a light week, building up again, but with the aim of peaking towards your fight. So you won't necessarily, in the 2nd month, in that cycle, you won't necessarily scale back in week 4. In those final weeks, you'll be peaking and being very precise with your training on each day so that you can be ready right for the competition, be at your best, without peaking too early and without being too late. Again, this is one of the things you have to work with your coach and your sparring partners to see where you're at in your training and how your performance is coming along so that you're peaking just right on time. Okay, so now on to the actual training. How are you gonna structure your workouts? Well, this is generally how I like to do it. First thing I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna skip rope. That's what I like to do first, just to get my body moving and get warm. Second thing I'm gonna do is my official warm-up. Skip rope gets my blood circulating. The warm-up gets my joints moving, gets my body moving, gets me more used to boxing motions. I have a little short clip of my typical warm-up on Instagram. I'll leave a link in the video description below for that. So then after your skip rope, after your warm-up, then you're gonna get into shadow boxing. Now, a long time ago, I remember having a conversation with a guy who was on the Canadian national team. And the way they used to structure their training was for every type of training you could do, shadow boxing, speed bag, whatever, you're gonna do the amount of rounds you have to fight plus 1. And that's not a bad template. I kind of have always worked off a template like that. But again, there are so many other factors. So, and it also depends what you like. For me, I'm a heavy bag fiend. I love the heavy bag. So all of my workouts and all my rounds are heavily weighted towards the heavy bag. Some people love the shadow boxing. Some people love the pad work. So you're gonna put your rounds where you can. Another thing is that in my day when I was training, pad work was more of a treat. You'd be lucky to get a round of pad work once, twice a week. It was like, it was icing on the cake. So nowadays I know coaches are doing more pad work with their fighters. So if you can get access to more pad work, take every round you can get. But let's say after the skip and the warm up, you're gonna get into your shadow boxing. 4 rounds, 5 rounds. Typically, I would like to work 1 round just footwork, no punches. And then the rest of the rounds I would work on, stuff I was working on. 4 or 5 rounds of shadow boxing, 5 rounds, 1 of them focused on footwork. Next, you're gonna get into your bag work. And I think most of you have seen my killer heavy bag workout online, what I typically like to do. 1 round is gonna be focused on the jab, 1 round southpaw, maybe a round or 2 on the inside, some rounds more with footwork and head movement. But the core of your bag work, especially as you get closer to a competition, is gonna be those 4 fight pace rounds. And these are not always easy to bust out. So you don't wanna do this on your easy days, you're gonna do this on your hard days. On your easy days, you could just do your regular bag work or just do something that engages your mind. Work on whatever you want to work on. On your hard days, if you're going to have a fight for 4 rounds, I want to see 4 rounds on the heavy bag like a fight, like an intelligent fight. So hard, fast work on the heavy bag, combos, head movement, footwork, fight pace on the heavy bag. You got to give me those 4 rounds. You got to put your body through a bit of the stress that you go through in sparring and that you're going to go through in the fight. So bag work can be anywhere from, let's say 4 or 5 to 10 rounds. And on a hard day, ideally 4 of those rounds should be a fight pace. The other rounds, you can focus on all kinds of different things. And again, that's what's going on in my training plans. In my training plans, I give you exactly what to work on every round. Next, standard, double end bag 4 rounds, speed bag 4 rounds. If you don't have access to one of those, then you're looking at some punch out drills. You're gonna have to look at something else that you can incorporate to get those punches in, to get that volume up. Speed bag and double end bag is a great tool. Speed bag is sort of a fun way to get in the extra work, get in those extra rounds. Other options are slip line to get in those rounds or slip bag. So other ways you can work in those rounds and have fun. So I would say that instead of 4 rounds double end bag, 4 rounds speed bag, if you got 8 total rounds there, if whatever rounds you're gonna do on the slip line or as punch out drills or on the slip bag, you can deduct those from your double end bag or your speed bag rounds so that you're sort of getting your quota of your total rounds for the week. Next, what we haven't talked about is pad work, partner drills, sparring. Generally, the way I look at it, any round you put in to sparring, pad work, partner drills, you can deduct those from your heavy bag rounds. So let's say for that day you had 8 rounds on the heavy bag that you're gonna do, but you get in 3 rounds of pad work with your coach, you can take away those heavy bag rounds, provided that the pad work is intense enough. If not, then you have to use your judgment. Let's say you got 3 moderate rounds of pad work, well maybe you only take 2 rounds off of the heavy bag. You gotta use your judgment in those cases. And then let's say you're working partner drills, maybe they're very intense, okay, then you take off a round on the heavy bag. Maybe you're just kind of lightly fooling around working on something with a couple rounds of partner drills, then maybe just take away 1 round on the heavy bag. So you want to account for it, use your sense, use your judgment, but still you want to get them all in there. A tough sparring round can be like 2 rounds on the heavy bag. So you got to gauge it and see. But like I said, on those sparring days, after you've done those sparring rounds, now you're in the championship rounds of your workout. So take advantage of that time. Everything you do on top of that is gonna be gravy. So work hard on the bag, work hard in your training. The only way you would maybe scale it lighter is if you're also gonna spar again the next day. Okay, so we got the whole structure: skipping rope, shadow box, warm up, heavy bag round, double end bag, speed bag, partner drill, sparring, pad work. We gotta put all those together to go into what we were talking about for your total rounds. Next is conditioning. Well, there's different kinds of conditioning that you're gonna be working on. Part of it is gonna be your running, part of it is gonna be your in-gym conditioning. Ab work. Generally, the standard is for me, pick your favorite exercises and do 100 reps or 50 reps of each exercise, aiming between 300 to 500 total reps. I mean, some people go crazy. Some people do 1,000 reps of abs. If you've got it in you, if you are an ab machine, then go for it. For me, my standard was I would take, let's say 3 to 6 exercises and bust out anywhere between 50 to 100 reps of each, get my quota of 300 to 500 reps of pure ab work. Conditioning, a lot of stuff is gonna be geared towards sprint type activity. Anaerobic sprints are more closely related to boxing movement or boxing output. Burpees, mountain climbers, shoe shine, anything that gets your body moving quick, working those bursts, 15 to 30 seconds, followed by a 15 to 30 second rest. And then again, you're gonna go, I would like to go the amount of time that I would be in a fight. So let's say 8 minutes worth. 8 sets of one thing, and that takes up 4 minutes, like a Tabata set, and then 8 sets of another thing, and that takes up, another section. So I wanna put in sprint work to be the equivalent of the amount of time I'll be fighting so that my body can sustain bursts of sprints throughout the length of a fight duration, which for amateur is gonna be 8 minutes of work, with you can factor in breaks depending on your level of fitness. One of the things that a lot of boxers neglect is their flexibility. Working on stretching your whole body, working on some yoga postures, working on something that's gonna move your body in a different way so that you are more mobile. It's also gonna help with injury prevention and recovery between workouts. This is one of the most neglected aspects for boxers, but if you're tight in your hips, if you're tight in your chest, tight in your shoulders, tight in your upper back, that tension is gonna use up energy and you're gonna gas out sooner. And it's gonna impede your development and the efficiency of your techniques. So when you're done all your training, don't neglect your stretching, don't neglect your flexibility. Okay, so that is just a broad outline for how I think you should train in boxing. If you are a beginner, work that structure, look towards building yourself up. If you are more of an elite amateur, then look at how you cycle your training. Keep track of what you're doing so that you can make that steady progress. Set standards for yourself. I've got much more detail in my training plans package, so check it out. Consider picking that up. And if you want everything detailed and laid out for you, I've got it all there. All right, so I hope you found this video informative. If you got any comments or questions, leave them below. Links in the video description below for the New York seminar, my boxing training plans, and the little link to my Instagram warm-up video. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Peace.